Hello everyone, welcome to week 12. We are quickly approaching the end of the semester. This week we are going to have our final unit from the textbook. After this, we're going to focus on review and preparing for the final exam. This week we are going to look at Unit 7, New Business. So, last week you created a new product. And hopefully you created your product pitch for it. But are you ready to run your business? What does it take to be a successful entrepreneur? A good product is a good place to start, but what do you need as an entrepreneur to succeed? According to Anita Roddick, the founder of The Body Shop, there are three components that make an entrepreneur: the person, the idea, and the resources to make it happen. Without these three components, a new company is bound to fail. So, let's think about great entrepreneurs that we know of in history or in recent times. What is something that they all have in common that made them so successful? Some common elements that you might hear are motivation, perseverance, drive, and a willing to sacrifice. Let's start today's lesson by taking a little self-quiz. Are you ready to be a successful entrepreneur? Remember, for a personal quiz, there are no wrong answers. This is a quiz about yourself and learning a little bit more about your personality. So, grab a pen and a piece of paper. List the numbers and then record your answer. At the end of the quiz, we will count your score to decide your final result. Okay, let's start with number 1. Yes or no? You are motivated by your own ideas, your personal dream. Number 2. You want to make money for yourself, not other people. Yes or no? Number 3. You are more resilient than the average person. Resilient means that you are strong when there is a problem or an unexpected change. Yes or no? Number 4. You are a strong leader. You can make people believe in your ideas and follow you. Yes or no? Number 5. You are able to survive without a paycheck for 3 months. Yes or no? Number 6. You find it difficult to work in a chaotic atmosphere. Yes or no? Number 7. You dislike pushing sales, which means you don't like pressuring someone to buy a product. Yes or no? Number 8. You are afraid of failure. Yes or no? Number 9. Your family will support your decision to be an entrepreneur even when things become difficult. This can be emotional support or financial support. Yes or no? And the last question. If your business venture fails, you will be qualified to get a regular job. You can be qualified either by your education, like a degree, or by your experience. Yes or no? All right, now let's look at your list of answers and calculate your score. Take a look at this answer key and add the points accordingly. Now let's look at your score results. If you got 8 or higher, you should start your company right now. You're ready to be an entrepreneur. If you scored between 4 and 7, you're on your way, but you need to prepare yourself a little more before making a final decision. And if you scored less than 4, you're better off sticking to a regular job. Being an entrepreneur is not really for you. So, now that we've thought of being an entrepreneur, opening our own business, let's learn about businesses that exist in the real world. Many economies contain a mix of public and private sector businesses. Which of these companies are public sector and which are private sector? Take a look at these different industries. It might be different from country to country. Think about your home country. Which ones are public and which ones are private? Hopefully, you were able to answer this question. And if you didn't know, you can always research about your country's industries that are public and private. Different companies will treat certain industries differently. A very clear example of this is the health services industry. In America, it is a private sector, but in South Korea, it is a public sector business. Why do you think each country made this decision from an economic viewpoint? And do you think that there are consequences to this decision? Okay, let's take a look at this week's vocabulary. This week, we're going to learn some economic terms. Please read the vocabulary words and then match them to the definitions. When you finish, we'll check your answers. Okay, let's take a look at those vocabulary words. Number 1, interest rate. The interest rate is the cost of borrowing money. When we borrow money, we need to pay back the loan, and we should pay a little extra. The percentage that we use to calculate this extra cost is the interest rate. Number 2, exchange rate. This is the price at which one currency can buy another. You usually see this at an airport, for example. When you try to buy, let's say, American dollars, you will see a number with a decimal point to express how much you can buy using Korean won. Number 3, inflation rate. This is the percentage increase in prices. Maybe if you ask your parents or grandparents how much 1 cup of ramyun used to cost when they were young, you'd be surprised to learn that the price has inflated a lot. Number 4, labor force. The labor force is a number of people working. Tax incentives are low taxes to encourage business activity. Government bureaucracy, official rules, regulations, and paperwork. This is often a huge obstacle to companies who want to make changes. Next, GDP or gross domestic product. This is the total value of goods and services produced in a country. We use the GDP to understand how economically successful a country is. 8, unemployment rate. The percentage of people without jobs. Right now in America, there is a rapid increase in the unemployment rate because of coronavirus. 9, foreign investment. Foreign investment is money from overseas. Investors from other countries who buy into local companies. And 10, balance of trade. the difference in value between a country's imports and exports. Now, let's look at this fill in the blank. Try to complete this economic profile without looking back at the terms in exercise A. I have copied the entire passage from the textbook. So if you don't have your textbook, you can copy it from the PowerPoint. When you finish, we'll come back and check your answers. Now let's check your answers. Listen closely and follow along. The economy is stable following the problems of the past 2 years. By following a tight monetary policy, the government has reduced the inflation rate to 2%. For borrowers, after going up dramatically, the interest rate is now down to 8%. The last 6 months have seen a slight improvement in the exchange rate against the dollar. For the country as a whole, the GDP has grown by 0.15%. Exports are increasing, and the balance of trade is starting to look much healthier. In terms of jobs, the unemployment rate continues to be a problem, as it is still 16%. In order to stimulate the economy and attract foreign investors from abroad, the government is offering new tax incentives as well as making a renewed effort to reduce government bureaucracy and red tape. Finally, a large labor force means there could be attractive investment opportunities over the next 5 years. All right. Now, if you look here, we have an English expression, red tape. We use red tape to talk about complicated processes that get in the way of doing what we want to do. It's a kind of barrier to our goals. In this case, government bureaucracy, filling out paperwork and talking to the right people and following every single step of the process is red tape. All right, now let's reflect a little about what we just learned. Think about some of the economic terms you looked at above or in the previous page in relation to your own country. Which do you think are going up, going down, or staying the same? You can consider these 3 aspects. 1. Consumer prices, or the price of things in the shops. 2. Public spending. In other words, the money that the government spends. Or 3. Consumer spending, the money that people spend. Notice that consumer prices and consumer spending are 2 different things. Consumer prices are the prices that businesses want people to pay. Consumer spending is the amount that people really do pay. Okay, so take a moment with your notebook to reflect on these 3 aspects. When you come back, we'll continue our lesson. Let's move on to the listening part of today's lesson. In this listening track, you're going to hear Abdirashid Douale, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Dahabshil, a global money transfer company. Listen and answer these questions. Number 1, how many countries does the company transfer money to? Number 2, Dahabshil helps 4 types of people or organizations. What are they? When you come back, we'll check your answers. Great, let's look at number 1. How many countries does this company transfer money to? A staggering 144 countries, or nearly. That is a lot. Number 2, the 4 types of people or organizations that they help. Number 1, students. Number 2, business organizations. Number 3, international organizations like World Bank and United Nations. And 4, migrant workers who are in Europe and other parts of the world and who want to send money home. All right. Were you able to understand his words? He had a very interesting accent. If you're unable to understand the audio track, you can always look at the back of the textbook. There, you'll find a script of all of the audio tracks. All right, now let's move on to the second part. We're going to continue the interview. This time, please listen and then fill in the blank. When you come back, we'll check your answers. Let's check your answers. All successful businesses have to, number 1, have a plan. They need to have a vision of where they're going. Next, they need to know how they're going to reach that vision. They must motivate their staff and keep their customers loyal. To keep their customers loyal, they must maintain their relationship with their customers. And they can do that by making sure that the customers are happy with their services. Finally, the companies must manage the difference between their income and their costs. Okay, so as we learned from this interview, the first thing that we really need is a vision and a plan. After we know what we want to do and where we want to go, we can start encouraging our staff to help us make this a reality, and of course, appealing to the customers to earn an income through their business. Okay. Now, in the third part of our listening section, we're going to hear the words of Susan Barat. We have heard her speak before. I think it was in the first week. So, she is the CEO of Nature's Way Foods. Here she talks about the advice she would give to anyone starting their own business. Listen and complete this extract from the audio script. When you come back, we'll check your answers. All right, let's check those answers. Susan Barat says, I hope they've got lots of energy. I think it is really difficult and quite hard work, and needs a significant level of commitment. I think it's really, really important to make sure you understand the marketplace and who your customers are going to be, and how you differentiate yourself or make yourself different from any of your competitors in that marketplace. People will only go to you and buy your product or service if they feel it is added value over and above what they can get elsewhere, or something they can't get elsewhere. So, for me, understanding the market and the customer is absolutely critical to the success of the business. The other key thing is that you've got sufficient cash. And sufficient cash is really important. How can you maintain a business without any income? So, let's take a look at this infographic. This is just a segment of the total infographic. The top reasons why startups fail. We can see the top 5 answers. There's no market need. They ran out of cash. They didn't hire the right team. They got outcompeted by another company. Or they had pricing cost issues. You might notice that these are all talked about in Susan's interview. So, running out of cash very difficult motivating your staff and, of course, balancing your budgets at the end of the month. So let's look at problem number 1, 2, and 3, the top 3 problems. In your opinion, what is the best solution to avoid this problem? What can you do to ensure that your business will not fail because of these things? Take a moment with your notebook to brainstorm some ideas. When you come back, we'll continue our lesson. The next part of our lesson is the reading section. First, let's think about the topic. Which new business has impressed you the most in the last 6 years? 6 years is not very long for a business to exist. That's still quite young. So, what is a new, young company that you think has become very successful? In today's reading, we're going to read 2 articles that compare 2 new businesses, or at least they were new at the time of this textbook's publishing. We're going to look at first, Groupon, and second, Dinka. Read the articles and then make notes in this chart. When you come back, we'll check your answers. All right, let's check our answers. As you can see, 2 answers are already supplied to you. So, let's start with the name of the business. In Article A, we are talking about Groupon, and in Article B, Dinka. The name of the founder. Groupon's founder is Andrew Mason, and Dinka's founder is Sandra Felsenstein. The age of the founder. Groupon's founder was 29, and Dinka's founder was 27. How old are you? Now, the age of the business at the time of writing, at the time when the article was written. At that time, Groupon was 2 years old, and Dinka was just over a year old. Where was the business located? Groupon was in Chicago, USA, and Dinka, Buenos Aires, Argentina. Number of employees. Groupon had 1,000 employees, and Dinka had only 4. So what is a new business, or what do they do? Dinka connects makers and distributors. Groupon taps into social buying. So they offer coupons that are only available for a limited time. The more people that subscribe to the coupon, the more of a discount they can get. All right, now let's look at today's grammar, which is on page 70. Today we're going to learn about time clauses. We use time clauses to provide information about actions and events in the past, present, and future. Basically, we use time clauses to explain when something happened, happens, or will happen. Let's take a look in the box. These are some very commonly used words for time clauses. We usually begin the time clause with these words: when, while, before, after, until, as soon as. There are other time clause words, but we will focus on these ones today. Now let's look at the sentence construction. We have 2 examples of sentences that use time clauses. The time clause is in red. After I exercised. After I exercised, I took a shower. I took a shower after I exercised. If we put the time clause at the beginning of the sentence, we must use a comma. Then we complete with the main clause. If we put the time clause at the end, then there is no comma. Simply main clause, time clause. Both of these sentences have the exact same meaning. This is just a style choice. So let's say, for example, you're writing an essay and the sentences sound very similar. You can change your sentence order to make it more interesting to listen to and have a better rhythm. Okay. There is a rule about our time clause. When we are using the time clause to talk about the past or present, we use the same verb tense as the main clause. Let's take a look at these sentences. After I exercised, I took a shower. Both the time clause and the main clause use past simple tense. How about in the present? After I exercise, I take a shower. Now we are using present tense in both the time clause and the main clause. Although we're using the same verb, because we're using present tense, we're now describing our habit or routine. Now this is the special rule. When we talk about the future using a time clause, we always use present or present perfect in the time clause. After I exercise, I will take a shower. After I have exercised, I will take a shower. So, pay close attention to our future sentences that use time clauses. The time clause will always be present or present perfect, and the main clause will be in the future. Now let's look at exercise A, which is on page 70 of your textbook. You must match the two sentence halves. Pay attention to some tiny clues like the tense, the pronouns, or maybe the word that is used in the time clause. When you come back, we'll check your answers. All right, let's check your answers. Number 1, could you check the departure time before we leave for the airport? Number 2, as soon as interest rates rise, the economy will slow down. Number 3, we need to stay until the meeting has finished. Number 4, the finance director needs to speak to you as soon as you get to the office. Number 5, she will move to Frankfurt when she finds a good job. Number 6, we won't open our new office until we've saved enough money. Number 7, I think you should save some money while you are still working. And 8, we can set up in that country when the conditions are right. All right, very good. Now we are going to complete these sentences with when, while, before, after, until, or as soon as. More than one answer may be possible in each case. When you come back, we'll check your answers. Great, now let's have a look at those answers. Number 1, we won't buy anything new until or before we've paid off all of our debts. Number 2, they'll start the meeting after, when, or as soon as the manager arrives. Number 3, I was finishing the report when my boss went out with clients. Number 4, it's urgent, so I'll phone you as soon as, when, or after I get home. Can you check the figures before you go home? Now let's look at the details of some of these sentences. Let's say, for example, number 4. It's urgent, so I'll phone you. We can use any of these words and it will be grammatically correct. They will also have a very similar meaning, but there's a subtle difference. I'll phone you as soon as I get home means I will call you right away. And there's a certain emergency or quickness to that. If we say, I'll phone you when I get home, it means that you will call me the moment you get home, but the feeling of emergency is not as strong. And then, I'll phone you after I get home is even more relaxed. It means that we're not in a rush to complete this phone call. The same applies to number 2. They'll start the meeting after the manager arrives, when the manager arrives, or as soon as the manager arrives. These words have a similar meaning but convey a different level of urgency. All right, now let's look at the next exercise. Read and choose the most appropriate option in each case. When you finish, we'll come back and check your answers. Let's check those answers. Listen and check. I remember when I first thought about quitting my job, and you advised me to gain some experience before I started a new business. I need to earn some profit as soon as possible, as I don't have much spare cash. Or do I have to accept that I won't have much money while I'm starting up my new business? Do I need to have some savings when I get my new business off the ground? I'm just not sure how I'll survive until my company starts making money. Please advise me as soon as you can. All right, hopefully you got those answers correct. Now let's talk about new companies a little more. Shiny and new. Entrepreneurship is an important catalyst to innovation. However, new companies must compete against established giants to survive. And, as we learned in a previous lesson, parent companies control a huge portion of the industry in many different sectors. For example, Nestle is not only involved in food, it also is involved in other completely unrelated products like body care. So, how can young, new companies compete against these giants that have so much control over the market share? On the other hand, there are many successful companies that suffered because they failed to compete against newcomers. Maybe they relied too much on the tradition of what was successful 10 years ago or 20 years ago, and they weren't able to innovate and stay with the modern market. So, what are some companies that were replaced? Which industries have disappeared completely? I'd like you to take out a notebook and reflect on this question. If you look at this graph, we can see a very famous example of this situation, especially in North America. In the past, everyone used Blockbuster, the local video rental store. It was a physical storefront, and you had to walk inside, pick your DVD from the shelf, and rent it, like a library. But Netflix suddenly appeared and offered a modern alternative to the video rental industry. Instead of going to a store and picking up a physical copy, which you later had to return, Netflix decided to start mailing the DVDs. Then, when you are ready to return your DVD, you simply put it in the mailbox. Eventually, that evolved into the digital streaming platform that we all know today. Blockbuster, which didn't believe in this vision, decided to stay the same. And unfortunately, that caused Blockbuster to bankrupt and completely disappear. So, are there any other examples of companies like this? Old giants that failed to compete with a shiny new enterprise? Today, we are going to examine this question for our participation work. First, you're going to research a company that was replaced by a newcomer. What was their industry? How did their products differ, the old company and the new company? What was different between them? Explain why the older company failed to compete. And finally, reflect on this research. What is a good way to ensure the long-term success of your company? Explain using detailed steps. As we have done in the past, the document is available on YSCEC. Please submit your homework to YSCEC before our next class. Now it's time for our office culture moment. Today I want to talk to you about LinkedIn. Maybe you've already heard of LinkedIn, or you might even have a LinkedIn profile already. But in case you haven't, I think it's really important for you to know about it. So, whenever we're trying to connect with other people, we can rely on social media networking. But there are so many different platforms used for totally different things. How can we use social media networking to network within business? Either networking with other peers or potential employers, or even celebrities who are famous in a certain industry. Let's break down some popular social media platforms. Many people in North America, at least, use Facebook, and often employers will look for you on Facebook and review your personal information when you apply for a job. However, the problem with this is that Facebook is too personal. So always set your Facebook to be private so that future bosses don't see your photos from your college parties and going on a beach vacation with your boyfriend or girlfriend. That is not professional, and it's an invasion of your privacy. The next social media platform is Twitter, and Twitter is used very often by companies, primarily as a marketing tool. While you can use Twitter to build an online presence, it's not quite as relevant for business networking. Instagram can be really useful for certain industries, especially ones that rely on portfolios, like graphic design, being an artist, etc. In this way, you can host a collection of your work to show to potential clients or potential coworkers, etc. So, Instagram definitely has a place in the business networking world. You might also be familiar with influencers who use their social media popularity to connect with businesses and form endorsement deals. And then finally, the good old-fashioned business card. It's still commonly used, but it is a little old and it's limited in its application. You have to physically give it to someone and they'll probably lose it. It's just a very old tradition. Still important, but how can we update this? So, the answer is LinkedIn. LinkedIn is our digital business card. It tells people who we are and what we do, where we work for, and just gives people an online summary of us in a professional setting. So take a look at this infographic from LinkedIn. Who uses LinkedIn? The majority of people on LinkedIn are from North America and Europe. So if you are looking for a job in North America or Europe, you should make a LinkedIn profile and connect with companies, employers, and recruiters in these countries. Not only is it used by 120 million professionals, it is also very popular for students. It is a good way to network your way into an internship or to show your experience to future employers. So, with all these people on LinkedIn showing off their stuff, how can you use LinkedIn? There are many ways to use this social media platform. One, business networking. Putting your name out there for people to find you and for you to find them. Two, referral marketing. Because we're connected by all of our contacts, like I am friends with John, John is friends with Aaron, Aaron is friends with Matthew. Now I and Matthew can connect. This is referral marketing. You have peers who recommend you to other people. You can also collect testimonials. This is somewhat like a referral letter that you would get from an employer. A testimonial is a comment made by a coworker or former employer that will say, I know this person, they work really well, and they have these skills. It's a sort of recommendation by your contacts. Next, it's like an online resume, so everyone can see your work experience and education. And it's also a useful recruitment tool. Often, companies will search on LinkedIn for people to hire in the future. So, how can you make a nice LinkedIn profile? There are many things that we need to include. Of course, we should have a professional photo, and you should be wearing a very professional outfit with a simple background. Under your name, we have space for a headline. This is where we put our job titles that are really interesting for people to see. So here we have marketeer, payments professional, and some interesting personal details. However, number one, the most important thing is to include keywords in your biography. So in your bio, include words like content creation, social media, events, PR, communications, digital marketing. When companies search on LinkedIn for future employees, they will search these terms. So include them in your profile. Another important thing to do with LinkedIn is to keep it up to date. Make sure you update it often and connect with the other people. Talk to them, recommend people, write testimonials for others, and keep your account alive. All right. So, in summary, today we learned about new businesses. We talked about entrepreneurs. and what's needed to succeed. In our grammar point, we talked about time clauses, and in our office culture moment, we talked about LinkedIn. So don't forget, for our participation work today, you need to compare new and old companies and then submit it to YSCEC. Also, please don't forget about our Zoom class today. You must announce your arrival to record your attendance. All students are responsible for their own announcement. And remember, 5 minutes late is absent. The Zoom meeting will be open early so that you have plenty of time to submit an announcement. Okay? So, thank you very much for your attention, and I'll see you in the Zoom class.